Hello everybody. My name is Bryant. I'm a local classical composer and pianist, and I'm extraordinarily glad to see all of you here tonight. I discovered making music years ago as a sort of coping mechanism. In a lot of ways, music really was an escape from my everyday. As a teenager with an acute neurological condition that left me intermittently paralyzed, without any hope of education or work, I needed a lot of therapy to get through my days. Fortunately, I had an amazing therapist who encouraged me to dig deep within myself and express parts of who I was in song. 7 years later, it is my career, it is my joy, and it is my gift to others. When I approached the Seattle Center to do this performance, I had in mind the goal that I would give some of that experience back. They graciously accepted and accommodated me into their Artists at the Center program, and because of that, I get to do this. On the table in front of you, there are sheets of paper and writing utensils. We kindly ask members of the audience to share their own personal stories to be read aloud on stage. Every 10 minutes, Caitlin here will take from your submissions, read them, and provide to me keywords I will then use to inform my playing. All entries will be anonymized unless you put your name to it, so feel free to be candid and honest with what you write. Write on a deep personal truth, maybe a trauma from your past, or something that you appreciate in the now. Whatever you decide to speak on, this simple act of writing it down externalizes the pain and heals the memory. I hope you enjoy everything there is here to offer. Thank you all again, and I think we'll get on with it. We will begin playing shortly.
A letter to Bailey. I was so incredibly shocked when we found out that I was pregnant. It was an amazing Valentine's Day. We were shocked, we were nervous, but we were happy. I had 2 kids, your brother and your sister, from previous relationships, but this would have been our first child together. Bailey Crawford Ferencin was the name that we chose, regardless of gender. Crawford being a family name, it's your dad's middle name and your uncle's first name as well. That morning, we headed into the hospital for our first amniotic test. I was almost 6 months pregnant, and we were beyond excited to see you. Today would be our first look inside to find out not only your sex, but also see how big you had gotten. Charisse Ferencin, the ultrasound tech, called my name, and I remember feeling you kick and thinking you were excited to meet us too. I was given a gown and asked to climb upon the exam table. We watched closely as the tech began to put leads on my belly and gel for the mouse-like Doppler to retrieve the images. The tech turned on a TV in front of us so we could see you up on the screen. You were moving around quite a bit, actually, and we were laughing, thinking you were showing off for the camera, which in hindsight was more than likely you struggling to survive. As the tech begins to move the Doppler over my belly, she begins to point out what she's seeing. She showed us your heart and your liver and your kidneys. She then asks, sort of quizzically, why we were there. And before I could say anything, she said, "Well, I see that there is no amniotic fluid." I immediately sat up and said, "What do you mean?" And then I instantly began to cry. She said, I can't be too sure. I'm going to go get the doctor." And I looked at your father and cried, "Oh no, there's something wrong." And he was like, no, we don't know that. It's going to be okay. He screamed, "What do you mean?" as she hurried out the door. Why would she say that? As we both clung to each other, struggling to compose ourselves, the doctor came in and began to tell us what somehow, I already knew. We were losing our baby. He confirmed that there indeed was very little amniotic fluid, and that there was nothing they could do at this time. You weren't viable, and in order for me to stay alive, we would have to let you go. Apparently, my membrane had stripped early and slowly, but surely amniotic fluid was leaking from your sac. Due to the stripping of my membrane being so early, Your lungs were developed enough to allow you to survive if you were to be born early. The only option was for me to have a late-term abortion. We were devastated, and your father and I left there feeling numb. As a memorial, I have your tiny feet tatted on my left shoulder, directly above a large peacock feather with your initials and birth date inside. I keep you in my heart always. You were born on July 1st, 2010. Your little feet were crossed at the ankles, and you were so beautiful. I got to hold you and tell you how much I loved you. And for that, I am eternally grateful.
Our next reading will begin in a minute. next reading will begin in approximately 1 minute.
It was only a year ago that I was formally diagnosed with autism at the age of 65. What made me seek a formal diagnosis? I was on leave to recover from the pandemic, a SharePoint migration where I was the lead, and a department reorganization where I ended up having 4 managers within a year. I was viewing videos on YouTube for general coping mechanisms when YouTube started serving me up videos on coping with autism struggles. The videos really started resonating with me, so I started wondering if I am actually autistic. Well, I started doing some research. I reviewed a lot of videos on traits and characteristics about autism. Many of them fit me. I even took the Autism Quotient Test by Dr. Simon Baron-Cohen, and I got a score of 42 out of 50. That's pretty evident that I have autism, since a score of 35 or higher indicates that. And so I reached out to my GP. I asked him for a referral to a late diagnosis specialist. His response was less than optimal. But that's a developmental disorder and you're not a young boy. Yikes. So I wouldn't take no for an answer. I reached out to another doctor at the office to see if I could find a specialist who would diagnose high-masking female autistics. 2 weeks later, after I gave all my history, she was pretty convinced I had autism. What in the past would have been called Asperger's, but she would need to be sure. She asked me to take another 300-question diagnostic survey to confirm that I did have autism. After I finished the survey, she said, yes, I was right, you have autism. And I was right. I have autism. I was 65. That night, I metaphorically swam in a sea of conflicting emotions. Anger that it had taken so long to get a proper diagnosis. Grief at not finding out until literally retirement age. So much confusion over what do I do now? Who do I tell? What will my family think of me? How will my friends react? What will happen at work? Yet ecstatic that I'm not broken or willful or lazy. I have a different brain. And finally, sadness for all the wasted opportunities because I didn't know I was autistic. Definitely a lot to process. The awareness of my autism has been vitally important. It turned the world right side up and untangled much of the jumbled mass of my experiences, thoughts, and feelings. I'd been stumbling around in a dark, unlit house, and now it was all lit up as bright as day. I didn't change. I still had the same difficulties and challenges, but now I saw myself differently, more clearly, more kindly, more calmly. My struggles were understandable, my failures often excusable, my successes more noteworthy. Seeing myself through the lens of ASD allowed me to forgive myself, accept myself, and concentrate my efforts on things that were actually achievable.
Our next reading will begin in 2 minutes.
I'm not holding myself up as a paragon of strength. I was just lucky. In my day, we called it amphetamine sulfate. Today we call it meth. Same stuff, just a different age. I left home when I was 19, and like most young men, I was kind of lost. Found some friends to live with, and I got a succession of dead-end temp jobs to pay the bills. For the first time in my life, I had a bit of money left over, so I spent my weekends getting fucked up with booze and a variety of pills. I discovered acid, which for me was great, but the problem was always getting the good stuff. The dealers were either dicks or just hell-bent on ripping us off. One dealer was especially sloppy and led me to his wholesaler, and then I discovered I was an entrepreneur. I dropped off my dealer's map and constructed a way to distribute for myself without raising attention. I created a cover business that allowed me to move around town, dropping off orders along with my cover products. It was all going so well. I used vast quantities of acid, which was great. I also started using large amounts of meth just to keep me going, and that felt really great. My mind was clear, and I could stay on task and not continually get distracted. Look, I knew nothing of ADHD and my personal relationship with it. All I knew was that this was the best I'd felt in my entire life. I kept my businesses going, and I wasn't sloppy. The only problem was that I just needed to snort a bit more meth every time just to get to the same level, which, considering the expense, was going to be an issue. No problem. I'll just start shooting it. And so I did. I was really careful. Glass syringes and my own clean needles bought from a dodgy dentist. All cleaned. I prepared my hits with distilled water and the cleanest meth. It worked, but it did make a bit of mess of my skin. No matter, I reduced the cost of my meth use by a factor of 10 by shooting it, although it was obvious that eventually I was going to need bigger hits. The guys were going over to Taffy's place on Friday night, and I was asked if I could bring over some sunshine. I had some just for the occasion, and so we were on. It wasn't like this was unusual. Somebody was always spaced at Taffy's. Friday came around, and after distributing, I popped a load of acid. We were all in the living room. Taffy was lying opposite me on a bunch of cushions. He was on his favorite heroin. And as the night wore on, everybody just drifted away and went home. It was just me and Taffy, and I was so fucked up that I didn't want to move. By about 4 a.m., it dawned on me that Taffy hadn't stirred for ages. I crawled across the room, and as I grabbed him, I knew he was dead. He'd been dead for ages, probably all night. I dragged my ass up and staggered out of the house. No, I didn't call for an ambulance. No, I didn't call the cops. No, I didn't call anyone. My apartment was about a block away, and I made it back without getting picked up. I crashed on my bed and passed out. I woke up eventually, got up and went into the bathroom and looked into the mirror. I looked like hell. And then I really looked at the track marks on my arms. Then it filtered in that Taffy was dead. His corpse was probably still in his front room. I looked at the marks on my arms again. I realized that this is the point in my life where I choose. Each path was going to be hard, but one led to certain death. Fortunately, I had no product in the apartment other than my personal meth stash, and then it hit me. I was going to conduct a funeral. My apartment was on the edge of a huge public park with acres of beautifully manicured lawn. My stash box contained my syringes, the needles, the tourniquet, in fact, everything along with 2 grams of purest meth, all contained in a vintage candy tin. I took the stash box and walked out of the apartment, across the road, and into the park. I walked about a quarter of a mile into the center of the park. I dropped onto my knees and pulled out the 4-inch knife I always carried. I then cut out a rectangle of sod the same size as the stash box and excavated down about 4 inches. I then placed the stash box in its grave, covered it over, and replaced the sod. The stash box was the most precious thing in my life. It was the source of my mind being opened and focused. It symbolized my income and my success. I buried it all, and I swore at that moment I would never use again. I would never deal. I would walk away from my life and find another one. I walked out of the park without looking back. I wouldn't be able to find the stash box again even if I wanted to. By the end of the day, the fog rolled into my mind. I knew it would. Taffy didn't even get a mention in the papers. Nobody came knocking. Fortunately, cell phone technology hadn't been invented. The internet didn't exist. Personal computers hadn't been invented. You know, it was relatively easy to isolate myself. I'm not sure I could have done it today. Cold turkey on my own was rough, but I got through it. I had enough money to pay for 3 months' rent, and eventually I found a crappy job selling advertising space for the local newspaper for no money. My new life was drab, lonely, boring, and poor. There wasn't a moment that went by that little voice in my head didn't say, just go on, just one little hit, you'll feel so much better. I never did. 45 years later, I never have. Not once. Writing this story, it's finally dawned on me why I only wear long-sleeve button-down shirts. The track marks faded a long time ago, but I can still see them there. Melissa, from the moment our paths crossed in that cute little coffee shop on Pike, I found myself lost in the depths of you. In your presence, I feel so safe and secure, so loved and cared for. Your laugh brightens my day so much, and sharing these past years, nearly a decade, with you has been the greatest joy I could have ever asked for. Coming off of college, when we both had no idea what our lives were going to look like, I was absolutely terrified. Majoring in psych Lake wasn't exactly the best idea at the time, as you know, and I was in dire straits with my family. When we moved in together at that first apartment, I ultimately didn't know how things were going to shake out. I didn't know whether or not you truly wanted me as I wanted you. And I never could find the courage to communicate that. I'm still working on it. Yet you stayed. And not only that, you brought light to every day of my life. Joy to every corner of my existence. You are my rock, my unwavering strength, the apple of my eye, and everything beautiful about my life. Through it all, you have stuck by me and shown me the true beauty of a life lived with love. Your mind is a beautiful place. I'm taken even by the way you speak, the way you carry yourself. Your kindness and empathy is an endless font. And every day you show me how to be a better man. Your strength is unbreakable from the bills to the deaths. You have remained my rock. Your determination is amazing. Your work and your career inspire me to work harder myself and to face my own trials with the same grace that you do. Thank you for all you have done for this family. Thank you for every day we spend in each other's company. Thank you a million times over. It is a privilege to live out my days with you. I love you, and I will never stop loving you. Forever, Michelle. P.S. I'll do the coffee every morning from now on. Writing this really put a lot of things in perspective for me.
Our next reading will begin in 1 minute.
I embarked on what I can only describe as a voyage of self-discovery. Here's some useful contextualization for you. I have, for the past 9 years, been in a flux state. Uneducated, unemployed, and profoundly disabled. I had nothing of interest going on in my life. Because of this, I fell deep into self-imposed isolation, constantly depressed, and in recovery from my disability. As a young person, this had a profound effect on my social development. Many of those beautiful triumphs and heartbreaking defeats in adolescence that shape people were robbed from me. I have a loyal cadre of friends who, for one reason or another, have moved to the various corners of the country. I keep in constant communication with them, as they were my only tie to the outside world for a long time. So when a friend of mine, who I love dearly, half-jokingly asked me, "Hey, you want to go to Europe?" my immediate response was, "Fucking sure." I didn't believe him. I thought that it was a cute joke, too absurd to happen. He wasn't joking. Over the course of 2 months, we did as much learning as we could, built itineraries, schedules, inventories, and budgets. Projecting a disabled person into somewhere like Italy was a huge logistical challenge, let alone 6 more countries. Yet we rose to meet each of those challenges as they came. I came down to Tennessee to meet him and 2 other friends that he was bringing with us. And together we made the long drive down to ATL. A fair few more hours and we touched down at Schiphol International Airport, the Netherlands, and that voyage begins in earnest. We saw the sights, the bustling commons of Amsterdam, a dichotomy of neon-soaked cityscape over old Gothic grandeur. We smelled the smells, the sea breeze off the Tyrrhenian, the aroma of sea salt wafting through the streets of Monterosso al Mare. We tasted the taste, food so foreign to our delicate American palates, we were worried even to ask for them. The paella was definitely worth it though. We had challenges, sure. You know, my wheelchair made many places treacherous and inaccessible to us. We partied much too often and spent way too much time on public transit hungover. We got lost constantly. We missed trains and buses, fought against the language barriers, but we rose to meet those challenges too. And in that, as corny as it may be to say, I found myself. It was an achievement, arduous and hard fought, sure, but it was a victory. It was a new horizon, new context, new beauty, and new goals. 3 weeks doing my level best to navigate unfamiliar territory in the company of incredible friends, well and truly changed my life for the better. And would have known, 2 years later, I'm playing the Seattle Center, having my story told to some of those friends and family. There isn't some grand moral here. I just love all of you. I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I can't wait to see what the future holds. Our show, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight.
It was an absolute pleasure to see you all here. I just want to say a special thank you to the City of Seattle, the Seattle Center, for this amazing opportunity, Caitlin Clark for providing the voice. I would like to also say thank you to Seven Sky and the Seattle Composers Alliance for putting me onto this opportunity in the first place, and obviously to all of my friends and family who came out here to support me. I love you all so dearly, so greatly, and I am so excited to see what the future holds. Thank you all for coming. Have a good night.